when Rashmi suggested that I come speak to the America's SA group, I said, I thought to myself, they want to talk about ROI models in Kubernetes. I mean, you all are the ones who I call when I have questions about some of the heavy technical topics. So I decided to share a little bit with you about something that's sort of a favorite topic of mine and sort of a fun thing, which is side projects. And so, who has ever read the book Contact by Carl Sagan or seen the film starring Jodie Foster? Yeah.
In the movie.
Great. So Foster's character is based on a real-life scientist named Jill Tarter, who ran the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California, and led for many years the global effort to identify patterns in signals from radio telescopes that might indicate the sign of alien intelligence and technology in other worlds. Trust me, this is going somewhere. So Jill also won the TED Prize in 2009 with a vision of citizen science, of enabling ordinary people, not just scientists, to help with the search for alien life and actually look at radio telescope signals themselves and see if they see patterns. Through a mutual friend, Jill invited me to build the software that would power this citizen science initiative. So I left the scrappy, failing startup where I was running engineering and set up an office in my apartment and recruited a few former coworkers, and we built something called SETI Quest Explorer. That's an actual radio telescope signal. And no, we didn't find any aliens, but we did start a business that we ran for the next 8 years or so, building custom web applications for corporate clients and other creative organizations. Called it the Hathersage Group. Now, along the way, I had a very specific technical need. I had a corporate client, financial services customer. We were doing a marketing system, a database-driven web system, and I was versioning it. I wanted each version to have a number using semantic versioning, and I wanted the version number to appear at the bottom of every page. So I did a little like render thing. This is a Ruby on Rails markup thing. Did a little render, had a little file. I kind of wanted to keep the version number separate from the application itself. So I had it in a separate file. So I could just edit this file, increment the version number, commit that back to the repo, and then that file would get read onto the page to show the version number. And I didn't think much of it, except it kind of left me feeling a little bit awkward that I had to make a whole commit just to increment the version number, because it seemed like you're supposed to be using Git tags on the commit that's actually released rather than adding a new commit, but I didn't really worry about it. Customer problem solved. It was a very lucrative deal. A little while later, I was on vacation in wine country in California and staying at a really nice place. And, I love coding. Coding has always been my favorite thing. And I started coding when I was 10 years old. And so I decided to tackle a little tiny side project not related to a specific customer, which was I was using a text file as my sort of list of things to do. So a to-do.txt type of thing. And I really wanted to use a CLI. I really wanted to type a command to say, what's the next thing I should work on? Or, okay, mark that thing done and give me the next thing, and so on like that. And so I, sitting there in that little place in wine country, I built a little command line tool that allows me to kind of manipulate my to-do. It's just for fun, my to-do things directly from the terminal. And I asked my wife, what should we call it? I want a fun, catchy name. And she said, call it Busy. And so to this day, I talk about everything is in Busy and actually use that for everything, both work and personal ever since. So then I joined GitLab, woohoo, and was using Busy every day for everything. Everything that I was doing when I first joined GitLab as a solution architect was in Busy, this little CLI that I built for myself. But then my life fell apart, basically. I ended up having to leave GitLab because of a brain tumor, as you probably know. And while I was recovering from the surgery, I wanted to sort of exercise my brain a little bit. So I decided to tackle some of these little coding projects that had been lurking in the background over the past few years. So one of them was that version numbering problem. I realized I really wanted to do it without having to generate a new commit every time, and I really wanted to have a CLI to update the version number. And of course, there are dozens of them, but I created my own. Once again, gave it a little catchy name, called it Vernum, gave it a little icon, and integrated it with GitLab CI/CD so that you don't actually need to generate a new commit. You can actually increment the version number using GitLab releases and Git tags, but still have that version number available to you downstream so you can embed it in your application, use it for your manifest, for package registry, whatever it is you need to do. And then this was really just for me, for fun, but I made a video about it while I was sort of offline during my gap from GitLab, my gap year, I guess you could call it. And the video got 4,000 views and some comments, people saying, hey, this is great. You figured this thing out. How to do semantic versioning in GitLab CI without adding a commit. That was the little side thing. Over time, over the course of my recovery from surgery, I ended up building a handful of little command line tools that for sort of personal productivity, and I call them the Steampunk Wizard Collection. That's another story, the name. But there's Busy and there's Vernum, but there's also Files Forever, which helps me organize files in Dropbox, and LabCrawler, which is actually GitLab specific. It sort of manipulates the GraphQL API. And then WizLib, which is a little framework for all of those. And then there's a studio here where all my little Scratch projects live. This is all public, all MIT licensed, all for fun, all on weekends and vacations and stuff. So the question then you're asking, I'm sure, is, I got Kubernetes and ROI models to work on. What does this have to do with delivering results for customers at GitLab? So a few things. First off, having some side projects keeps me in the developer mindset. So when I talk to customers or prospects with GitLab, I'm there. I'm kind of thinking the way that they're thinking, even though in my case it's just me, and some customers it's thousands of developers. Still, there are aspects of the developer mindset that I can bring from kind of firsthand experience every single day to the table. One of those is around agile workflow. I push myself to use issues and merge requests for absolutely everything, so that I have examples at hand, but also, I'm actually in the mindset of what some of the nuances are of the different mechanisms within GitLab. I also use test-driven development for everything, which obviously is sometimes hard to do in a real life situation, but when it's just for fun, you can do that with CI and test coverage. So I have all my test suites in my pipelines and style checks and coverage. And I'm proud of the fact that I have 95% code coverage on Busy, for example. Might be unrealistic for teams, but it's a fun way to work for me. Never write a line of production code without a failing test. Finally, I use GitLab also for distribution documentation, and I like to think of it as inner sourcing, although I'm the inner in this case. So I have actual deployment part of the pipeline that builds the package, creates the release, publishes out to PyPy, where all the projects live, publicly available, and then also publishes documentation using GitLab pages, so that there is kind of doing everything end to end. And all of this really just helps me to, when I engage with software organizations, to be kind of like, yeah, I kind of run my own little weekend software company open source project thing. And so I kind of get that workflow and get to exercise those muscles. So developer mindset is one part, but also I come with really informed recommendations that I think I've kind of learned more about some certain aspects of the DevOps process through the side projects. Because a lot of my own experience in coding and managing coders comes from the sort of early Agile days or even earlier. And so actually working with GitLab in a hands-on way with projects allows me to make recommendations from a sense of actual knowledge and actual working with it rather than just sort of the abstract. An example is settings. I've spent a lot of time with the different merge request settings. Merge commit with semi-linear history is always challenging to explain. Protected branches, why you want allowed to push and merge to be set to no one, that kind of thing. So really coming with these sort of informed recommendations is important. But I also have some specific techniques that I've been able in professional services to deliver to customers, and some of which might be useful to you and your customers. One of them is I became a big fan of MDBook. MDBook is a static site generator from the Rust community. Generates these beautiful documentation books, essentially, with a table of contents. It's hierarchical. It's super, super simple to pull together. It's very opinionated. It has a little theme chooser, which I like because I'm a dark mode fan. Search button, and it just generates this with almost no, it's basically just a folder full of markdown, and it creates this. It's super easy. So I've actually started to use that for example, in pro services, we have these delivery kits, and now just shipped a delivery kit for self-managed to SaaS migrations using direct transfer. That's all in MDBook. So it kind of uses that really nice interface, and it's something I kind of figured out with my side projects.
The feedback that folks may have, based on the
Bored you already. That's great.
No, this is wonderful. Just from my side, I'm about to drop off, but I'm really loving this. I can't wait to catch the rest of the recording.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Releases, GitLab releases are a really great feature, right? It's kind of metadata about a tag with your evidence and your assets and everything. Putting aside for a question how this page is organized, the problem is that there's this section called release notes, which you can edit, but really what's really cool is you can also edit it from your pipeline. And so I started tinkering with a way to add a change log directly to release notes from merge request titles. So instead of having to kind of maintain a change log separately or have some kind of manual process, it literally just looks at the titles of the merge requests that have merged since the last release and adds them to the release notes. So it's really clear what's changed. And also added a capability to log out activity from within the pipeline related to that release, including a link to the pipeline itself that created the release. So that if there's ever a need to kind of go back and say, oh, was this actually published? Was this actually pushed to the registry or to Artifactory? Was this deployed? Which environment was it deployed to? You could actually see that directly within the release object in GitLab. And this was kind of one of those things I've been thinking for a long time. Oh, it'd be great to be able to do. And I did it in the context of my side projects and have yet to actually roll this out for a customer, but it certainly would be possible. So little techniques. I kind of started rolling some of those techniques together into a CI/CD library. So I have all these projects. They're all in Python. They all publish to PyPy. They all use MDBook. Well, some of them use MDBook for documentation. So I started putting all those CI jobs in one place, a little bit like templates and components, but it's just within a project that I can include from the different Python projects. And it's sort of what everyone does, right? You kind of create your little library of CI elements. Ended up starting to kind of copy parts of that for pro services clients when I was trying to implement CI, because there were chunks that were really useful. Why not just share a copy? And so kind of came up with some conventions and a structure for CI/CD libraries. It turns out that while templates and components are really powerful, a lot of organizations really want to just have a project where they keep all the CI that's shared across their projects within their GitLab instance. And this provided a really great starting point for that. So in fact, actual work from my side project became sort of starting points for work for at least 3 or 4 clients. And that's actually, I maintain that on gitlab.com at Pro CI/CD is the top level group where that lives. Some of those techniques are kind of mundane. Some of them are things I've told you about, like the version management stuff and the PyPy deployment. And some of them are kind of unconventional and odd, but I found useful in certain client situations. And I've sort of generalized those and replicated them back into this library. Sort of a mess, but I did put some documentation around it. So this is where it's kind of started out as a side project and now has really become kind of part of the fabric of what we do in pro services, or certainly what I do on CI/CD engagements. This is sort of tips, tricks, and techniques that picked up along the way for working with GitLab CI/CD, and especially working with includes and inputs in ways that allow you to kind of generalize your CI/CD. So we've kind of gone all the way from, you know, me sitting in wine country hacking on something to something that's actually been very useful and very practical in a day-to-day fashion for GitLab customers.
I
I'm
like
pretty proud
that.
of that. I'm pretty excited about it, and great to be starting to get some feedback about it. I don't tend to promote this stuff very much. This is probably almost the first time I've talked about it. But you know, kind of try to maintain it and maintain a high level of quality. Just started on an experiment so busy that to-do list thing that I built is actually on version 7 now. It's ridiculously sophisticated. I'm like, it's a little embarrassing how much work I put into that over the years. Now I'm experimenting with actually integrating it with GitLab Issues with the checkboxes in GitLab Issues so that I can work at the terminal, which is how I like to work, and then just run a single command to kind of update the tasks in an issue. Not sure that model is really the one that works, but it's kind of an experiment that I've been tinkering with. And actually, this is for a customer engagement. Don't worry, I sanitized it. So if this is interesting, you know, what do you do if you want to start working on some side projects or take some side projects and start kind of sharing them a little bit more or leveraging them in your work? First thing I say is to have fun. I made sure that all my little projects have cute, catchy names and little fun icons with them, and you know, that I enjoy the coding that I do. I work in Python, which is my favorite language, and I go to the local hacker meetup once a week, and we sit around, drink beer, and hack on our laptops and just enjoy it. The second is to really approach this with an experimentation mindset. This is your opportunity to do whatever you feel like. It doesn't have to be specifically for a customer. It can be just, hey, I want to try something out. I want to see how this is going to work. It does mean spending more time coding, maybe less time gaming or gardening or whatever the things are that you do on your weekends. I'm someone who enjoys coding, so that's just, I get to do it for fun. Also, don't be afraid to make your version of something. You know, there are probably 20 semantic versioning little command utilities out there. There are certainly about 100 to-do list tools. There's nothing innovative or groundbreaking about anything that I've done, but it's mine. And I built it the way my brain works, the way I like things, and then share it from there. So it really is an opportunity to kind of personalize your world. And take advantage of the free tier. You know, it's easy enough to create a group on GitLab.com with your personal GitLab ID and kind of be a part of the community on the weekends when you're working during the week, if that's something that motivates you. These are the projects that I just talked about. That's a little bit about me. I'd love to hear any thoughts or feedback or questions that anyone has.
I definitely appreciate it. You know, your approach. Number one, as a side note, I was actually going to type this in the chat, but I said I wouldn't type it. But I was saying that love your storytelling approach. It's a masterclass as I guess a recovering essay. You know, I'll call you a recovering essay. But I was just thinking to myself, if you could imagine the impression we could give to customers if we talk about GitLab the way you've done, it'll be different from all the presentations they've heard, because you know, if customers are constantly hearing presentations from different vendors, and if we change it up a little bit, it'll leave an impression. So that's, you know, that's what I got from just even the presentation style with what you did. But in terms of the content, definitely love it. I love it, especially when you're talking about, you know, the tinkering that you're doing is helping you to understand how customers may see this or work with it. And when you were talking about the CIC labels, you know, we're beginning the SME initiative here, and one of the toughest things is to have discussions on, all right, we know exactly what, you know, well, we may not know, but we are learning a lot about the product, and we want to create time to learn about the product and expertise. But then the toughest thing is to say, okay, let's look at it from the customer's point of view. How do they plan to use CI/CD components and stuff? Things like, how do we give them recommendations? You know, you should create labels and create a taxonomy in a certain way. So those are the sort of things, you know, I don't know how we will get the experience of that. Maybe bringing folks like yourself, PSC, to say, okay, how is it done in our practice, and tell us and teach us how to do these things. But those are the some things we are getting from customers. Those are the questions customers are asking us of. So it was interesting to see your approach of doing this through tinkering, right? And working through it.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's kind of my, thanks, Tony. It's kind of my personality that if I don't actually sort of type it and work with it, I have a hard time explaining it, right? So when I do actually type and work with and tinker with something, I tend to be able to talk about it pretty authoritatively and clearly and handle pretty nuanced questions. So.
I'll back that up. One of the best videos we ever, or classes we ever got, was when Francis was still here at SA, and you were teaching us about CI/CD. And you remember you went back and forth, and you were like, you were trying to remember the rules and like what made more sense for you. And I remember you had a good way of remembering what how to think of rules and workflows in there. So I still appreciate that video that you did for us. So if anybody has any questions ever about how CI/CD works, absolutely check with Francis. Has a great knowledge of that. My only complaint is that you're in wine country and you didn't name it Releaseling, but you named it, it's fine. I mean, that's
Ooh, that's a good one.
that's my only
Releaseling.
Or maybe some Merlot actions or something, right?
It's like version number Vernum, and then
I like Vernum. Vernum is Latin for spring, something like that, right? So that works. But okay, I was thinking, yeah, okay, there you go. So I like it.
That's pretty good. I'm gonna call you next time I need a name for something, David.
Anytime, buddy.
Francis, I will say one other thing. I've been working on a side project, actually with a couple of my brothers. Good or bad, depends on what day it is, right? And so I'm not going to go there on that level. But what I will say is that not everybody I'm working with on this side project is familiar with development workflows, with Git, with GitLab, and to me it was shocking when I first started. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean I have to explain what SCM is? Really? In this day and age? And so I had to really, eat a little crow and come back and go, you know what? Not everybody does. Folks come from different backgrounds and the way they work. And so it did bring a whole new perspective to my conversations with customers, because there are cases where I'll say, hey, how familiar are you with this? And instead of just blazing on through stuff and just assuming they know how to do it all. And so that was a huge aha moment for me, not only being able to work through pieces I don't normally work through in GitLab, but also just being a little more compassionate for folks who may not, do what we do every single day of our life, right? They may only have a very small smidge of understanding. And so being able to explore that, I thought was really nice.
Well, that is true. And, as someone who now works sort of day-to-day hands-on with GitLab customers, I can tell you there is just as much diversity in our customers too. I mean, I work with, senior DevOps engineers who only have the faintest clue about why you might want to automate testing. And then others who like have figured everything out and just have very specific questions, right? So there is a real diversity out there. Yeah, it's true.
And the way folks use GitLab. One of my brothers happens to use it at his, in his professional life, but he doesn't use all the pieces. He doesn't use issues. He uses Jira, and he does branching and stuff in the, to me, the weirdest way possible. And so I'm always like, hold my tongue going, what are you doing? Yeah. So there are ways people work that I would never even considered. So I love that, right? That your side projects help give you perspective into ways of working that aren't what we espouse, but they work. Just have to kind of scratch your head and figure out, why are you doing it that way?
Yeah, the third of these, Lab Crawler, I actually developed while I was offline, not a GitLab employee, because my wife is the GitLab administrator at a GitLab customer, and like needed to like basically query for certain types of data. And I said, oh, maybe I can throw something together for you. And and so it was literally that. It was like somebody using GitLab or trying to use GitLab in an odd way. And I was like, well, maybe we can handle that. Thanks, Ken.
Great stuff, Francis. Love having you on, even though you're not an SA anymore.
Hey,
You're always an essay to me, Francis.
yeah, we'll see. Well, thank you all. Feel free to shoot me a coffee chat or anything. Always love to talk to the SA team.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
Here's
this.
anybody. Thanks.
Back to you, Ansel.